And we welcome you back. Millions of Americans, as you know, voted in Tuesday's election, and vote counting currently continuing. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden leading the race to the presidency, but incumbent Donald Trump has already launched legal action citing irregularities, though he's provided no proof. For more on this, let's now bring into the conversation Ambassador Charles Stith. He's a former U.S. ambassador to Tanzania and chairman of the African Presidential Leadership Center in South Africa, to give us some analysis on the state of the U.S. elections and to talk to us about what all this means for the U.S. and South Africa. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making the time, Ambassador Stith.
Good to be with you. The agenda is one of my favorite shows. You all are doing a great job. Thank you.
Our favorite. Ambassador, your African Presidential Leadership Center, it seeks to showcase the work and achievements of former presidents of the continent. Would you ever have thought that this accusation that usually is thrown at African polls, that of possible vote misrepresentation and rigging, is now a conversation in a U.S. election?
Well, the short answer is definitely no. I was in Tanzania during their election and was chatting with some of the election observers, and jokingly, they said to me, do you think we need to go over to observe your election? So this is a different position for us to be in. But unfortunately, with the current occupant of the White House, it's not surprising.
So as of Wednesday morning, Joe Biden had received more votes than any candidate in U.S. history, 69.5 million. So riding on the strength of that, he's already addressed Americans, saying all indications are that he will win. What's the latest that you have in terms of the election?
Well, I'm in Johannesburg, so I'm pretty much looking at the same results that
we're looking at.
You're seeing. And of course, this is a very close election. The one point that I would make that is really a nuance that is critical to understand what's going on. This election is really being decided by the politics of the lockdown. When you look at the exit polls, the issue of the coronavirus is actually not the top two concerns of folks who voted. It's the economy. And the economic impact of the lockdown certainly looms large. You look at Nevada, for example, 200,000 workers in Nevada have been displaced by the lockdown. And you look at 2016, Hillary Clinton carried Nevada by 27,000 votes. Today, former Vice President Biden is clinging on to a lead of a little bit more than 7,000. It doesn't take much insight or foresight to appreciate that all of those workers who are displaced are concerned about the lockdown. They want it to end. And if you recall, in the last debate, President Trump accused Vice President Biden of wanting to continue the lockdown currently and into the future. And quite frankly, former Vice President Biden's response was not clear nor cogent relative to how he would deal with the lockdown. So, those folks in Nevada who work for the casino industry and the hotel industry that have lost their jobs and are facing homelessness and are hungry, I think that was reflected in the results that we see right now.
So, according to you, was the race as tight as we're told, or were Americans decisive? Arizona, for instance, is said to have voted for a Democrat for the first time since 1996.
Well, again, I think the difference is Biden's response on the lockdown question. I think if he had said simply, look, I'm going to do everything I can to end the lockdown. I'm going to make sure we're prepared in the future so we'll never have to lock down the economy again. And dealing with the lockdown starts with forging an international consensus. I can do that and Trump can't, I think the results would have been much more different, and we wouldn't be 2 days out trying to determine who's won the election. By every objective measure, the Trump presidency has been a disaster. From the divisiveness that he's sown to the disastrous results in the wake of COVID-19 because of his failure of leadership. And I think had Biden responded more clearly and more cogently on this issue, we'd be looking at a blowout.
So Trump's threat to approach the Supreme Court, will this hold the announcement back, the announcement of the results?
No. I mean, what's going on now is what always goes on. I mean, generally, the projections are such that the networks tend to declare who's won based on the exit polls and trends. But the reality is the election isn't officially over until the states certify the election results. And that never happens the night of the election. Generally, it's a week or two after the election before those results are certified. An obvious exception was 2000, George W. Bush versus Al Gore. And that was because it took a month to resolve the situation in Florida. My sense is, given the improvements that we've made in voting technology, given the large numbers of counters in this election, which we've been able to see from the many broadcasts from the U.S., I anticipate that we'll get some clarity about the winner of this election very soon.
I can, just by your answer, I can tell you're trying to be cautious about your responses. But you're a former ambassador to Tanzania, a former ambassador to South Africa, Patrick Gaspard. He tweets, he says, "Hey, Dems, you're about to retake the presidency from the hands of this madman. Stop walking around like zombies. Stop the flagellation about all the people who voted for the racist misogynist. Recognize the win, own it, and do something with it." That confidence about the win?
The reality is, I mean, the tweet makes for good TV, I guess. But the reality is, I think the approach of the Biden camp is reasonable and responsible. As he said the night of the election after the polls closed, that he feels good about the way the results were trending. That's right, and that was the appropriate thing to say. And likewise, the point that he made that it's not up to him to decide the election or Trump to decide the election, that it's up to the American people to decide the election. And everybody, and this is not Biden, but my remarks, that everybody ought to just take a chill pill for a minute, let the results come in, and let the people's decision be heard.
So yesterday when he addressed the media, and you're referring to it now, he was saying that he will lead Americans. He will not lead the Reds or the Blues. He will lead all Americans. Is he getting ready to take the seat?
Well, look, one thing, and this is in Biden's DNA, he's a healing spirit. And I don't think anybody would argue against the fact that America needs a little healing right about now. The real issue is not his commitment to bringing the country together. The real issue is how is he going to sequence his agenda to move the country out of the morass in which it finds itself post the COVID-19 epidemic. As I've indicated in the book that I've just completed, A View from South Africa, A View from the Other Side, Lockdown in South Africa, the first thing he needs to do is to make it clear that he's going to bring the lockdown to an end, because you can't begin recovery until the lockdown is over. The first step is forging an international consensus. Biden is capable of doing that. Trump wasn't and is not capable of doing so. And then after that, I think if he launches this stimulus package around infrastructure in particular, which will put people to work, infuse the economy with much needed dollars, I think he's got a great shot of not only uniting the American people, but bringing Congress together. I think there are enough Republicans that he can appeal to, as he's demonstrated, to get a positive response to such initiatives. And if he does, I think the country is well on the way to healing, and maybe more importantly, well on the way to recovery.
The conversation you keep highlighting about the possibility of the reintroduction of a lockdown, that's also a conversation in South Africa, and it's a very difficult decision to take considering the impacts of hard lockdowns. Why are you so convinced that this is necessary?
Well, because it hadn't worked. Is the bottom line. I mean, you look at the countries across the globe which did less severe lockdowns or took such punitive actions. All of those countries are faring better. As I said a moment ago, I was in Tanzania not for the elections, but during the elections, and Tanzania is pretty much back to normal. Magufuli made the decision early on that he couldn't shut down the economy, because if he did, the tens of millions of people who make a living in the informal sector would be doomed to starvation and homelessness. And you can't get better outcomes by creating poorer people. And I think that dynamic is clear across the board. I mean, Tanzania's economy is projected to grow. The lowball figure is around 2.6% for 2020. The higher number is 4.7. South Africa's economy last quarter contracted by 16%. You can't keep racking up numbers like that and expect to keep the economy viable. You look at Tanzania, there's no anecdotal or statistical evidence that the impact in terms of infection rates and mortality rates has been any more significant than South Africa. Yet, as I said, the country is pretty much back to normal. People are working. Economic activity is taking place. And I'd close by saying, that this false dichotomy, do we save jobs or do we save lives? The reality is jobs are lives. If people aren't working, they aren't able to feed themselves or their families. They aren't able to provide shelter.
Ambassador
And
Stith,
if people are hungry and they're stressed, their immune systems are compromised.
my producers are rushing on me to close off the conversation, but just a quick one. What is your response to the results of the Tanzanian election, where there have been questions about human rights abuses?
Well, the short answer is I didn't pay enough attention, and I wasn't an election observer, so to be able to give a firsthand account is impossible to do. What I would say is that prior to the election, President Magufuli had a 76% approval rating. He's done a great job with the Tanzanian economy. They reached middle income status in July, 5 years ahead of schedule. And he's done a great job in dealing with COVID-19. So that he would win the election and win it overwhelmingly was not a surprise at all. Whether the exact numbers reflect any irregularities, I'm not sure.
Thanks for your analysis, Ambassador Charles Stith.
Thank you.
Thank you.